regional disparities, different markets that coexist simultaneously in the Indian economy today in power space especially. I think these are all, growth pangs. All of a sudden you have opened up this market to multiple models, and you see industry taking the lead by setting up standalone projects. You see large consumers taking the lead, setting up captive projects. You see, of course, the public utilities also trying to take their piece of cake by setting up projects. So that is on the supply augmentation front. Whereas on transmission and distribution aspects to power, I think a lot more investment, a lot more emphasis is required. We're hopeful that 12th plan will correct some of these lapses. Highways has been a reasonably good story, especially in the last 1 decade, but much more can be done in that sector. Civil aviation, you now see swanky airports in Delhi, in Hyderabad, in Bangalore, and definitely one we're hoping in Bombay and other cities as well. So infrastructure-wise, civil aviation is getting attention, but there are other structural issues which are also now being attended to. So on the regulatory side, India has introduced 3 new regulators in the infrastructure space. You have the Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulator, you have the Airports Regulator, and you have the Competition Commission. Now, Railways is also mooting for a neutral regulator who will manage or recommend the tariffs. The banking law is now again being amended. That would probably give rise to new banks emerging, new private sector banks emerging. So, having said all that, definitely I'm not trying to present a very rosy picture here. I have worked closely with a lot of infrastructure players. Issues are very much idiosyncratic to projects. Some issues are just very tough to even comprehend. But structurally, we definitely see that in spite of all these ups and downs, there is a trend that is moving towards greater maturity and greater acceptance of these new models in the Indian infrastructure scene. On the project side, identification is a challenge, and of course, development, financial closure, and operations have got their own set of different types of challenges that players are grappling with. I would now take you to a specific project, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor project, which is a regional development project. Unlike most other projects in India which are more specific to a particular macroeconomy, this is a large project, almost looking at 17 to 18% of India's geography. And for the first time, we have initiated a regional development model with complete master planning of the entire region, and then mapping specific projects within that region. So to give you an overview, this project is stretching between the political and financial capital of India, all the way from Delhi to Bombay, 1483 kilometers, covering the states of Rajasthan, Haryana, of course NCR, Delhi, a little bit of Uttar Pradesh, going into Madhya Pradesh. Largely, Gujarat is taking a big piece of the cake, and of course Maharashtra and a couple of union territories in between. So the entire 150 kilometer band between this particular line that you see there is the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor project. So, but what is the actual, economy in that corridor as of now? Yes, something big is being planned. $90 billion of investment is being planned. There is a Japanese-led initiative, etc. is all there. What is the current economy? The current economy itself is very strong in these states. If you look at the DMIC states, their share to overall exports in the country is 60%. The DMIC regions constitute existing large industry belts in Gujarat, in Maharashtra, in Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. And if you look at all the FDI that has come into India over the last 1 decade, 60% of that has basically gone into these states. So we're not building anything from scratch, nor is this a completely greenfield initiative. It is augmenting existing capabilities, identifying new opportunities that can be worked upon, and kind of creating a large-scale model that could, leapfrog India to the next level of development. This is a major initiative that is out there. So the vision of DMIC is to create a strong economic base in that region. Of course, bring in state-of-art infrastructure and present this as a model infrastructure development project globally, not just in India. So the ambition is pretty big. The goals are also pretty, out there. 15% CAGR is expected in employment over the next 5 years, which is literally doubling the employment potential of the region. Tripling the industrial output in 5 years and quadrupling exports in the region in 5 years. Now, these are not big ambitions out there. These have actually been proven outside in different countries, in Korea, in China, in Taiwan, in, of course, Singapore. I think such rapid growth led by infrastructure augmentation has been witnessed. So I think India has learned from some of these models and trying to customize its own framework for this particular initiative. Industrial infrastructure and complementing physical infrastructure are being planned in this region. So if I should just profile the project out for you, the length of the project is 1483 kilometers, and the influence area is, an astounding number of 436,000 square kilometers, which is roughly 14% of India's geographic area. Now, the impacted population, you have 180 million population residing in that corridor, which is almost twice that of Thailand and Malaysia put together. Which has 80 million labor pool already in place, without accounting for possible migration this project could entail. So 17% of the total population and workforce is available in this geography. The investment being planned in the first phase is 100 billion. Of course, this does not look at the multiplier effect, this does not look at all the other ancillary investments that will come in. This is direct investment that is coming from the players who have committed to this project. Industrial growth is expected to grow by 14 times. New employment potential, direct employment potential is 3 million. Foreign ownership, for the first time in the history of this country, of India, we are looking at a direct stake by foreign government into a large infrastructure project. 26% will be owned by Japanese. And this is expected to create a 1.5% additional impact on the GDP. So, of all the states that are out there, if you look at some of the relatively underdeveloped states such as Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, I think they are the biggest beneficiaries. Though Gujarat and Maharashtra, etc., are going to have a fair piece of that pie, I think the biggest beneficiaries are the hinterlands of Rajasthan, Maharashtra, where large land parcels have been identified, where new township projects, greenfield cities are being planned. So I think that's a very interesting trend that can come out of this particular project. Now there are 4 key features to the planning of this project. They have identified nodes, which are development nodes. Around 24 such nodes have been identified in this corridor. They are looking at a spatial planning framework, which I think for the first time we are introducing something like that in a large scale. Also, they are looking at specific priority sectors, which are the most impact-creating sectors, which will in turn have their own multiplier effect. And of course, development models. Let me just take a couple of minutes on these 3 models. So the development node is basically, you have identified investment regions in industrial areas. Investment regions are large scale, minimum 20,000 hectares of land area that has been identified. And the criteria for selecting an investment region is at least one such region is required to be present in each of these DMIC states. And of course, some of the unsaid criteria are proximity to urban agglomerations, potential for developing large-scale greenfield projects, and availability of land parcels. On a slightly smaller scale, basically to augment and build upon whatever is already existing, they have also mooted the idea of industrial areas. Industrial areas are to be developed on a relatively smaller 10,000 hectares of land and would basically try to improve upon whatever is existing rather than creating something from scratch. So another interesting planning aspect to this whole project is that of a spatial framework. They have demarcated the entire project and the zones in the project into basically three types based upon Human Development Index and industrial development of those regions. A, B, and C zones. Identify 35, 14, and 39 respectively of these zones. And specific policy, investment, initiatives are being taken up in these zones which go hand in hand with the characteristics of these zones. So I think that kind of a broad-based thinking is being applied for probably the first time in an infrastructure project of this scale. Now, what are the development models that are being proposed? Of course, the state alone cannot handle such a large project and you need a lot of participation by private sector. So the model that has been identified is again based upon two important factors. You have planned this region, you have identified that this is the potential for a particular node, this is not the potential for a particular node. How would you attract, how would you basically attract investments into these different nodes? Based upon marketability of that very project, the sub-project under DMIC, and the affordability of land, that's a serious factor, especially in India. So they have identified the models into three types: private sector-like model, public-private partnership model, and public sector development model. So private sector model is basically where the role of government is to just collect or collate land and build trunk infrastructure, whereas private sector will come in, make all the capital investments and specialized infrastructure that is required in that project. On a PPP model, of course, the investment is joined by both public and private players. Discounted land would be offered by the government, and the private sector will invest in specialized infrastructure and specific capital for these projects. On a public sector based model, these are locations where I think it is extremely difficult for you to attract any private sector investment because they have to be developed from scratch. There is no ecosystem available. So also one reason could be the land prices are extremely high that it just becomes not feasible for private sector to invest. So land acquisition, creating trunk infrastructure and special infrastructure will be the responsibility of the state, whereas private sector will come in to tailor specific business units in that identified sub-project. So I think these models are very interesting, and I hope will have a long-term impact on these projects. Priority industries have been identified. These industries have a precedence in that region and will create a multiplier effect, hopefully, in that region. The institutional framework for DMIC, which being a very complex project, is four-tier. You have a central steering authority, an apex authority led by the Prime Minister, and of course all the chief ministers of the DMIC states. You have the specific ministries and departments of Government of India also representing into that apex authority. Whereas the nodal agency, the agency empowered to handle the project is DMIC, Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation, which is led by Mr. Amitabh Kant. This corporation is in charge of creating the entire plan, the perspective plan and the master plan for the region, awarding out projects and engaging with different stakeholders in the course of making these projects work. At each state level, the state governments have committed to set up nodal agencies which will coordinate particularly for those projects being planned under the DMIC banner. And of course, at a project level, you will have special purpose vehicles which will own, manage and run the projects. So, and the equity structure of this Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation is between Government of India, the Japanese side represented by JBIC, and state-owned financial institutions. So what is the current status? Are we still talking in air or do we have something on the ground going? For a project such as this, I think planning is the most important step, and they have spent a lot of time, effort and energy into this exercise. I'm glad to say that. I have gone through the perspective plans, I've gone through the some of the regional master plans that have been created. I think they have thought through a lot of issues when deciding upon these frameworks that are presented to you. So the framework has been more or less decided. The signing of loan agreements with JICA, JBIC, especially the $4.5 billion loan that they've immediately committed to take up projects has been done. Perspective plans, statewide reports have been prepared. The master plan is more or less done. However, pre-feasibility reports for all these project sites are in working progress. MOUs have been signed with all the concerned state governments. The master planning consultants and transaction advisors, including us, we have also been appointed along with our partner for this project. Approval and notification of development plans. Implementation of first phase are being planned in 2013, and of course launch of select industrial cities is also being planned in 2013. And interestingly, JBIC is investing in select early bird projects, that is what they call it, and which is where $4.5 billion of loan has already been committed. Now, the size of opportunities I think is massive. If you look at from the Singapore's context, I think the biggest investments are happening in integrated township, real estate development, are happening in manufacturing, industrial processing, SEZ, are happening in, of course, in logistics infrastructure, where I think Singapore can play a role. If you look at the nature of projects that are going to be awarded out under this DMIC umbrella, you have roads, additional lanes to existing roads, new links, new feeder routes, and massive expressways between large development sites. Railway projects, again, greenfield and brownfield projects have been planned. Ports, greenfield and brownfield development, logistics hubs around the ports. Power, 10,000 megawatts of additional capacity is planned, especially under this, does not fall under the other power sector planning initiatives. This falls particularly under DMIC. And of course, airports are another area where a lot of infrastructure investment will go into. For Singapore, I think the two nodes where it can play an active role are that of integrated townships and skill development initiatives. So, large capacity building initiatives in form of setting up knowledge hubs, centers for excellence, etc. are being planned under DMIC corridor project. I think the framework and the ecosystem for the same my colleague will explain in her presentation. So that's a place where I think Singapore can play a role. And setting up of infrastructure, of integrated townships is another space where Singapore can probably play a role. So some of these I have identified here. So if I have to categorize the kind of opportunities, you have development opportunities because there is already a set framework, there is an ecosystem for a development through PPP models. Of course, a lot of these projects will engage contractors to deliver the project, so that's an opportunity. Consultants, over 200 projects are being planned in the next 5 to 10 years, large projects. So there would be great need for consultants. Operations and maintenance is a space where there is still a lot of deficit in the Indian market. That I think is a spot, given Singapore's experience of managing, owning and operating, especially integrated township projects, urban infrastructure projects will be useful to India and this particular DMIC project. Equipment suppliers can enter into joint ventures with local players and set up manufacturing facilities, and of course this requires a lot of private financing, so FIs and PEs can definitely play a role. So I think having presented this, I would leave with this last thought. So India's 1.25 billion citizens have today higher expectations about their future than they've ever had before. They have seen the economy grow much faster in the past 10 years than it did earlier and deliver visible benefits to a large number of people. This has understandably raised the expectations of all sections, especially those who have benefited less. Our people are now much more aware of what is possible, and I think they will not settle for less. This is in fact the first paragraph of 12th plan's draft, and this shows the growing acceptance of policymakers, of the administration, of the government, that there is a strong need and an increasing demand from the Indian public for broad-based infrastructure development. And definitely there are a lot of opportunities where players in Singapore can collaborate with India. Thank you so much for the opportunity.